Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. The transfer window officially opened this morning, and boy has the rumour mill already gone into overdrive. We've got plenty of transfer stories coming your way today. We've got English press, Italian press, Spanish press. They are all talking about Liverpool and the potential players that we may be signing this summer. So kicking things off with a rumour that's been knocking around for a couple of weeks now, the Fekir story is certainly an interesting one when it comes to potential recruitments at Liverpool this summer. And it's a bit of a weird one because so far everything's just been about talks between the clubs. It all feels a little bit like conjecture. There hasn't really been anything concrete, and I think what we're all waiting for at the moment is to actually hear of an actual bid from Liverpool, because as soon as you hear about money being put on the table, of the club saying we want this player and this is how much we're willing to pay for it, that's when you know that a transfer story is really going to start gathering momentum. And at first I found it a little bit disheartening that so far there hasn't been any of that. It's all been about talks. It's all been about, saying, Fekir might be interested in a move, Liverpool might be interested, Liverpool are thinking about opening talks with Lyon and stuff like that. But I think you've got to take into account that even though the window is now open, there is still a game to play between now and the end of Liverpool's season, and it's a pretty big one as well. We have got the Champions League final to play, so it wouldn't surprise me if we don't hear anything sort of to do with concrete interest until after that game, because as much as squad harmony at Liverpool is great at the moment, and a potential incoming arrival like Fekir in theory should only really bolster the morale around the team, there's kind of a feeling that you don't really want to upset the apple cart, and you don't really want to put players off and have them sort of thinking and already looking over their shoulder at players coming in this summer and thinking, am I going to keep my spot in the team? What do I need to do to keep my spot in the team? Am I going to have to adapt my style of play to compete with this new fella coming in? So it's no real surprise that we haven't heard of any actual bids from Liverpool, but it does sound like the interest is there. I mean, when you look back to things like the Mo Salah transfer and you think about how long that saga took before things ever really got going, it was a while before Liverpool actually sort of started laying money down the table and actually entered negotiations with Roma, and even then the transfer took a while to get over the line. I think in terms of the transfers that Liverpool are going to try and make this summer, we can expect them to be wrapped up a little bit earlier, because obviously the World Cup is coming up, and I think Jurgen Klopp will want to have his squad in place before that, because if not, you can only really start to think about signing players again after the World Cup has happened, and by then pre-season will already be going, will already be coming up to the Premier League season, so there won't be much long left of the transfer window, because it does of course close on August 9th this year rather than the 31st. So I can certainly see this kind of move gathering momentum once that final is out the way and once Liverpool can fully turn their attention to transfer negotiations. So as for where Fekir would actually fit in for Liverpool, I think he's looking like a potential more natural replacement than Phil Coutinho than we've had when we've looked at playing like Oxlade-Chamberlain in the Coutinho role in the latter half of this season. I think he fits that kind of winger/midfielder role that we're looking for, in that he's someone who will probably primarily play in the midfield three should Liverpool choose the formation that they've been playing for most of this season to go into next season with. However, you can see, like, if we want to rest Firmino, Salah or Mane, there's every possibility that Fekir could play in the front three as well. It's somewhere that I think he's played at various points over his career. He's played left wing very early on. He's played right wing for Lyon a little bit more recently as well. More recently, I think over the last season, his main position has been in behind the striker as a number 10. So I think, like I said, that midfield role, charging forward and just linking it up with the attack a little bit more, is probably where we can see Fekir playing, which I think would be a good thing, because in the slightly smaller games this season, not the Champions League games, I think we have struggled a little bit in the fact that there's been a bit of a gap between the front three and the midfield three, and I think Liverpool need a bit more of a link man there. Obviously, the reason that I think we beat Brighton was just because we had an extra body in the box with Solanki in that situation, and I think Fekir would provide that for Liverpool. As for actual concerns about what he'd bring to the club, I think the main concerns are partially around playing style and physique. Obviously, we know that Fekir he's got a little bit of an injury record. He had a very bad ACL injury a couple of years ago, and it did take him a very, very long time to recover from that. However, what gives me heart is the fact that while when he first came back, he was deemed a little bit too bulky, he looked like he put on weight, he certainly didn't look match sharp. A year later, after a pre-season, Fekir apparently came back fitter than ever. He looked ready and raring to go for the season, and he started last season this season technically still, like an absolute house on fire, scoring a lot of goals and and generally helping Lyon to hit some very good form earlier on in the season. So I think while maybe he isn't in perfect condition to play for Liverpool at the moment, the fact that he's got that kind of character to build his body up and put in the effort to get himself into prime physical condition, to me suggests that given time at Liverpool, even if he arrives in a slightly dodgy condition, he could work his way up, kind of like Oxlade-Chamberlain has, into being in peak condition to play for Liverpool and to fit into our gegenpressing system. And then obviously the other concern is the fact that the league he plays in, Ligue 1 in France, isn't necessarily one of the best leagues in the world. And while his stats this season have been fantastic, it's 18 goals in 29 appearances in the league, which is effectively around about 2 in 3, and I think 6 assists as well. Those are good numbers, and if he could bring those to Liverpool, it would be absolutely fantastic. But having looked at some of the goals he's scored, a lot of them have been the result of mazy dribbles, where he's kind of exposed the standard of defending in Ligue 1, and you do wonder whether, he'd find it a little bit more difficult to score those kind of goals, get into those kind of positions, and get free from defenders up against Premier League defences. It's one where we'd have to wait and see, because Mo Salah, everyone said that about Serie A. I think standard of defending in Serie A is a little bit higher than in the French league, it's fair to say. So Mo Salah didn't have as much problem, as we now know, translating those numbers from Roma to Liverpool. So it'd certainly be an interesting one to see. I think the fact that he'd probably be playing in a slightly more withdrawn role at Liverpool means that naturally he's probably not going to get that many goals as well. But certainly the kind of numbers that we'd be hoping for from a midfield contributor, just to take a little bit of pressure off of the front three. So yeah, that is absolutely a signing that I think we should be getting excited about. Should it happen, it feels like one that could start to gather momentum once the Champions League final is out the way. It's just a matter of waiting until Liverpool actually put a bid on the table. So fingers crossed that Liverpool can start making movements on that one. Elsewhere, there have been plenty of other rumours about potential midfield targets for Liverpool over the past few days. Just this morning, Don Balon, the Spanish news outlet, I believe it is, has said that Liverpool are, quote, willing to throw the window out of the house, unquote, to sign Marco Asensio. I mean, answers on a postcard what that actually means, but I think the essential gist is that Liverpool are very interested in signing Asensio off of Real Madrid. I think he fits a very similar mould to Nabil Fekir in that he can play in the front three, he can play on the wings, but primarily you kind of see him as an attacking midfielder, so he'd probably be playing that sort of number 8/number 10 role in Liverpool's midfield three that we're all thinking about Fekir taking up. The reasons that he apparently wants to leave, he's worried about losing playing time at Atletico Madrid, obviously with the potential incomings that they've got this summer as well. He sees himself possibly moving even further down the pecking order, and apparently Liverpool and Manchester United, something obviously to bear in mind when thinking about our chances of getting the player, are very, very interested in bringing Marco Asensio in. And obviously, this has come from the Spanish news outlets, not the English and Liverpool-based news outlets, so take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt. It does feel like it's very much early doors in this potential rumour, and it could completely disappear by tomorrow, but certainly one to think about. It certainly sounds like these are the kind of players that Liverpool are being linked with. Elsewhere in the midfield, when you look a little bit further back, there's been more Jorginho talk as well today, someone that has been touted as a potential Liverpool target for a while now, probably filling in a number 6 role or potentially something a little bit forward, but acting effectively as a deep-lying playmaker like he has done at Napoli this season. That is kind of the role that you can see him occupying at Liverpool. However, the big spanner in the works is the fact that Manchester City are apparently also interested in bringing in Jorginho. And I think the thing with Liverpool here, and the way that we can potentially get one over Man City and put ourselves ahead in the transfer negotiations, is to effectively do what we did with Virgil van Dijk, where we said, look, if you go to City, you will get lots of trophies, you'll get lots of money, you'll play under Pep Guardiola, but you probably won't be the main man. Because the main reason that City are probably interested in Jorginho is as a replacement / sort of a rotation option for Fernandinho, because obviously Fernandinho has been fantastic this season, but he is getting on a little bit and he isn't quite capable of playing the full quota of games that Man City have wanted him to play this season. So Jorginho would probably be, we basically have to sell that would be on a rotational basis that he'd be at Man City, whereas at Liverpool he would be the main man in midfield, and so that is how we can kind of get one up over Man City. The fact that he's been considered as a target for Liverpool apparently for quite a few months now, for me suggests that there is a possibility of that. It feels a little bit like the Van Dijk move, where while he's been linked with a lot of clubs, the Liverpool interest has always been there. The one problem for me is the fact that even if we do bring in Jorginho, I can't quite see him being the absolute number 1 choice because of the presence of Jordan Henderson. Now, Jordan Henderson, obviously a much maligned figure at the club. However, over the second half of this season, I think he's absolutely proved that not only is he captain material, but he is a very, very good option, potentially a first choice option for Liverpool in that number 6 role. So I think even if we did bring Jorginho in, Jordan Henderson would still be absolutely at least battling for that place at number 6. So it makes it slightly difficult for Liverpool to make that sell to Jorginho and say, look, you will be our number 1 guy, because he's always going to be saying, well, what about your captain? Because he plays in the same position as me. So another one that looks like it'll be interesting to see how it develops. I think we'll certainly find out over the next few days whether it's Liverpool or Man City who are really the front runners for his signature. Elsewhere, again in the midfield, and talking of the number 6 role as well, Neil Jones of Goal.com and formerly of Liverpool Echo as well, so a respected and trusted journalist on all matters Liverpool, has reported this morning that Emre Can's deal with Juventus is to finally be tied up after the Champions League final. Obviously, it makes sense that it's not going to happen before then, because all that talk I had earlier about upsetting the apple cart, you don't want players leaving at this stage. He has also flied out with the squad to the Marbella training camp, so a little bit interesting why he'd do that if the move to Juventus is completely finalised. I think there's still a suggestion that maybe Liverpool will find some way to push a move over the line and maybe come to some sort of agreement with Emre Can, some sort of compromise over the contracts. But I think if Emre Can does leave, then that does leave a hole in that number 6 role, because while I said that Jordan Henderson is good, his injury record and also the sheer amount of games that Liverpool have to play with the amount of competitions than the fronts that they are fighting on, you just can't see Jordan Henderson being the first choice option in all of those games. And the fact of the matter is, if Emre Can leaves, we don't really have any other options in that number 6 role. You know, Gini van Wijnaldum has looked passable in it this season, but certainly not an ideal option. James Milner, I think, is better in the box-to-box role. Same with Marco Grujic. I think he's not quite got the discipline needed for that number 6 role, certainly at the age that he is, even coming back from a very good loan spell at Cardiff. Oxlade-Chamberlain, you know, that's not going to happen. And I think Keita as well, while he can play number 6, he's done that in the past in his career, I think for Red Bull Salzburg mainly. I feel like it would be a waste of his attacking talents to keep him so far back on the pitch. So Liverpool absolutely do need a number 6 in this transfer window, especially if Emre Can leaves. I think it's one of the signings that, if they are to compete for the Premier League title next season, they absolutely need to be making. And if it's not Jorginho, then Ndidi is another name that has been mentioned. And while, you know, he's not necessarily a glamour signing like Jorginho is, he's not coming from the exotic shores of Napoli in Italy or anything like that, I think he's a decent player, you know, and I think Jordan Henderson is good enough that he can still be the first choice, and then Ndidi is effectively the backup / rotation option that comes in when Jordan Henderson is injured, knackered, or also, you know, a tactical switch option. You know, I think if we're looking at a situation where maybe we want a little bit of drive forward from our number 6, then we could potentially bring in Ndidi for Jordan Henderson on a game-by-game, horses for courses kind of basis. So it's a signing that I think Liverpool absolutely have to be making, whether it's Jorginho, whether it's Ndidi, whether it's someone else entirely. It's something that we need to do, but with the targets that we've got at the moment, I'd certainly be happy bringing in both Ndidi and Jorginho. But again, they are both players that while interest has been mentioned in the past, nothing concrete has emerged yet, so one to keep the finger on the pulse there. And then finally, another midfielder which has been, the stories have kind of come back a lot over the last few days. Manuel Lanzini for West Ham has been also touted as a potential signing for Liverpool. And again, he fits that Fekir Asensio kind of mould for me, where he's a versatile winger / midfielder. He'd probably be playing in that number 8 / number 10 role in the midfield 3 primarily for Liverpool. And while people have scoffed at Lanzini and said, look, he's not the kind of player we should be interested in, again, you know, people are looking at Fekir and saying he's the more exotic option. He'd probably cost more as well, so he's certainly far more exciting. I think you've got to look at Lanzini and say, well, at the end of the day, he's actually not that bad a player. He's certainly shown up in the games against Liverpool every now and then. He's been a little bit of a thorn in our side. He's got a couple of goals against us over the past few years. And I just think if Liverpool, and Jurgen Klopp's team and Michael Edwards' team have identified him as a potential target, then I have every faith that he has got the potential to succeed at Liverpool. I mean, you look at Andrew Robertson, wasn't necessarily a standout player at Hull, did all right, and then the transfer team identified him and said, this is the player that we want, and they were vindicated in that decision because Andy Robertson has been absolutely fantastic. And I mean, yes, Lanzini's numbers aren't great. He's scored like 5 goals, I think, this season, but when you think about the players that are ahead of him that he's providing service to, and the players behind him that are providing service to him at West Ham, and then the ones that would be doing so at Liverpool, you can certainly see that if he was playing reasonably regularly at Liverpool, then he'd absolutely get more goals and more assists at Liverpool than he has done at West Ham. And also, you know, just because we're signing him doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be a starter for Liverpool. A lot of the talk this summer transfer window is how we simply need more bodies in midfield, because Liverpool have suffered to the back end of this season with the amount of midfielders who have got injured and the lack of options that we have available. And especially with Oxlade-Chamberlain potentially out until November, I think it's unlikely that we will see him certainly playing at the top level until the latter months of next season, maybe even just the last 3 months, which is unfortunate, but that's the position we're in. Then it entirely makes sense that we could bring in Lanzini, not necessarily as a stopgap, but a rotation option for Liverpool there, someone that we can bring off of the bench or bring in for those games in the middle of the season where things do get very congested. So yeah, plenty of midfielders being linked with Liverpool. That is not a surprise. Like I said, we do need more midfield bodies, and while some of them aren't the most exciting transfer stories in the world, the fact of the matter is that we don't only need first 11, first team quality players in those midfield positions, we are going to need squad options as well. So absolutely watch this space when it comes to Liverpool transfer stories this summer. And looking slightly further up the pitch, a very, very exciting transfer story that's come out recently is the potential move of Ousmane Dembele to Liverpool this summer. I mean, it sounds a little bit mad. He's obviously a fantastic player. Jurgen Klopp has admired him in the past. At the age of 21, he's got the world at his feet. He's got so much room to improve already, despite being a fantastic player already. So he would be a brilliant signing for Liverpool, and I think he fits quite a good mould in that he's not quite the winger midfielder that I've been talking about earlier on this video, but he's a bit of a winger striker, so he can fill in for Salah, he can fill in for Mane, he can fill in for Firmino as well. He can also potentially do what Dom Solanki did in the game against Brighton, where he comes in as a striker and we end up playing a front four, which, I mean, a front four of Dembele, Mane, Firmino and Salah sounds absolutely horrifying if you're a fan of any club other than Liverpool. But the big stumbling block is the money involved in this transfer, and the fact that Liverpool don't necessarily need a player like Ousmane Dembele. I think the fact that we're in a Champions League final and we've got there basically on the merits of a fantastic attacking unit shows that we don't necessarily need to be bringing in any more players for the first team in the attack. Certainly thinking about bringing in players that can come in on a rotational basis. But the problem with Dembele is the fact that he will probably cost a 3-figure sum at least if Liverpool are looking to buy him permanently. I mean, Barcelona bought him in for £130 million only last year, so they're not going to be willing to take any sort of massive hit on that transfer fee. So I think at least £100 million is what we're looking at if Liverpool want to buy him. They also kind of want to sell him off apparently to fund a move for Antoine Griezmann, who's going to cost in the ballpark of that kind of figure as well. So Liverpool would have to stump up a fairly huge amount of cash if they wanted to buy him permanently. And like I said, our forward line is in a pretty good way at the moment, and Liverpool are not in the position that Man City are often in, where they can look at a position and say, yeah, that player would be all right, let's just splash 100 million quid on him, like they did last summer, where they said fullbacks a bit of an issue, we should probably sort that out, let's throw 100 million at it. Liverpool are not in that position because they just don't have enough money, and also I don't think Jurgen Klopp's the kind of manager who looks to do things like that. The only time we're ever going to splash the cash is like on Virgil van Dijk, where we're like, this is an absolute problem position, he is the perfect player to sort the problem out, that is why we're going to spend 75 million quid. So I can't see us buying Ousmane Dembele on a permanent deal. Personally, I could actually see it more happening on a loan spell, even though it feels weird that we can maybe take him in for 1 year, develop him and then ship him out again, given that he's not necessarily an imperative signing as well. It's not like we desperately need him for next season. If we bought him, it would be with a view to keeping him at Liverpool for several years, developing him and nurturing his place in the side. So I can't really see that happening. And also apparently I could kind of see loan to buy happening, because then Liverpool could loan him in, and then at the end of the season the two parties would sit down and say, well, I want to bring him in for this amount of money, or Barcelona would say, no, he's had a good season and we want him back because we can see him fulfilling a very good role in the side. However, apparently, according to I think it was the Liverpool Echo and Italian reports today, Jurgen Klopp is a little bit averse to that kind of whole loan to buy scenario that we could potentially go ahead with. So it's a mad rumour. It would be an absolutely fantastic sign for Liverpool, a massive coup. I'd go mad if we did sign him, but don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath on the Dembele front. Cross your fingers, by all means, cross your toes, cross everything you possibly can, but don't get too excited at this stage. So, looking further back on the pitch, there have been a lot of rumours about Liverpool potentially being in for various goalkeepers today in this summer transfer window, and The bottom line, I think, is that Loris Karius, for me, has done enough to be Liverpool's number one going into next season. I mean, there's suggestions that we should do an Edison, where we should bring in another player who's going to take us to the next level. People are looking at Alisson and Oblak as those kind of players. But I just think, like I said, with the limited budget that Liverpool have had and the style that we employ when it comes to spending money in the transfer window, I can't see us spending 60, 70 million, potentially even 100 million on a player like Alisson or Oblak in a position that isn't necessarily a problem position at the moment. And yes, Alisson or Oblak would probably represent an improvement on what we've got in the goalkeeping department at the moment. However, like I said, it's not a big enough improvement really, and the state of the goalkeeping department at the moment isn't so low that we really need to be spending that kind of money. And then the other names that have been touted are your Butlins and other players like that, I guess. Pickford was one that was touted last summer. It's those kind of players who have that Premier League experience and are therefore going to cost a little bit more, and are probably going to cost, I think Butland's been mentioned as being around 40 million quid to bring him in, and I just think those players aren't really enough of an improvement, or even an improvement at all, on what we've got in Loris Karius to justify spending that kind of money on them. So personally, I can't see us really splashing huge amounts of cash on a goalkeeper this summer. I think Jurgen Klopp is content with what he's got in Loris Karius as the number one. However, in terms of backup goalkeepers, I think there is a question there, and there is room for Liverpool to bring players in. And there has been a lot of talk about us bringing in an experienced goalie, someone who's got experience in winning trophies, playing for the big teams in net, who Liverpool could bring in as a kind of mentor / backup for Loris Karius whenever that is needed, or should Loris Karius have an absolute howler of a season next year. Buffon is obviously the name that has been mentioned this morning. I think it was in the Italian press that they've been talking about it. Obviously, he has just announced that he will be leaving Juventus at the end of the season. Absolutely no mention of retirement there from Gianluigi Buffon, so it does open up the possibility of a move to another club. I mean, maybe bringing Buffon in. Like I said, he'd be certainly a good mentor for Loris Karius, certainly a good backup as well if we ever need to bring him in. It's a bit mad, and potentially he could end up demanding very high wages. It's obviously also come out of the Italian press rather than the English press as well, so this is more them talking about who Buffon could go to rather than the English press saying Liverpool are interested in this player. And I think that's something to bear in mind a lot, is that while we've heard stories about goalkeepers coming into Liverpool, up until recently, or recently in general, it's mainly been coming from overseas. You know, the last time that we really had English press talking about a Liverpool goalkeeper move was when the Alisson rumours first came through, and they have well and truly died down, and have been died down for a while now. We've heard basically nothing from like the Liverpool Echo or the English news outlets like the Mirror or the Daily Mail or the Telegraph or anyone like that, Paul Joyce, Chris Bascom, etc., about Liverpool being interested in a goalkeeper. So, I mean, yeah, fine, Buffon would be great, but another one where you shouldn't hold your breath. And another report that's come out of the Italian press, again, they seem mad about Liverpool at the moment. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, it was also them who broke the Ousmane Dembele story as well, so they're talking about us a lot. The Italian press are also reporting that we are in for Milan's Donnarumma. Now, this would be a much bigger signing for Liverpool. He would cost something around £60 million apparently, but according to the Italian press, we are actually front runners to sign him along with PSG. Now, the issue there with the mention of PSG is the fact that one of the reasons that Donnarumma apparently wants to leave Milan, now obviously this is all rumour and everything, is the amount of money that they're offering him, and obviously PSG would offer him absolutely huge amounts of cash, probably much more than Liverpool can possibly offer. And the issue again with me is the fact that I don't think we're really looking for a replacement for Loris Karius, and Donnarumma is a young up-and-coming goalkeeper. He's obviously going to cost a lot, like Alisson, like Oblak. He's in that kind of ballpark of the 60 million and above kind of fees. If we were to bring him in, he'd have to be the starting goalkeeper in the majority of the games. So yeah, I mean, fine. It's nice that people are talking about Liverpool. It's nice that Liverpool are being touted as some of the names who are interested in the biggest moves that could be going on in Europe this summer. But I cannot see the Donnarumma move happening. I mean, let me know in the comments if you think Liverpool should be bringing in a new goalkeeper. Let me know who it should be. If you think that is, whether it should be backup for Loris Karius, whether it should be a replacement for him, whether we should be throwing all the money in the world to Oblak, or whether we should be looking at someone slightly cheaper in Alisson or Donnarumma, or maybe even a Butland. Do let me know in the comments what you think on that. And now the defence. And this is a very, very interesting case at Liverpool at the moment, because while there's always the perennial question about the defence, people always think we need another centre-back, we need new full-backs. At the moment, it's kind of died down, and that is mainly because Liverpool's defence has actually been doing incredibly well at the moment. I mean, if you take our record in the league from the game against Spurs where we lost 4-1, ignoring that and taking only the games after that, Liverpool actually have a better record in terms of the amount of goals conceded than anyone else in the league. So clearly there aren't huge problems there. I think the main questions are about things like rotation and getting in more high quality players to come in when players like Alexander-Arnold or Robertson aren't necessarily able to play. And a name that has been touted a lot over the past few years, has kind of died down recently, is Ryan Sessegnon. And obviously I think this is one that's never really going to go away. He's always going to be one of the hottest young prospects until he eventually probably moves away from Fulham. However, I think with the state that Liverpool are in with their left back position at the moment, we've got it pretty much absolutely boxed off, hopefully for at least 5, maybe even 10 years with Andy Robertson. So I think bringing in another young and up and coming prospect in that position is only going to upset things, is only going to give the manager more headaches than he really needs in that position. And I think the big thing that people say is the fact that he is this huge up-and-coming talent. He is probably going to move to a Big Six club at some point. So Liverpool should potentially be doing all they can to ensure that it's us he moves to rather than one of our rivals. But I just think that's not Liverpool's style. That's not how we roll. I mean, you look at the Benjamin Mendy saga last summer, for example. Liverpool were in for a left-back. They were apparently in for a left-back of the style of Benjamin Mendy, you know, one that likes to get forward and contribute to the attack and get concrete numbers in terms of their contribution to the attack. However, Liverpool just completely said, no, fine, City can have Benjamin Mendy. You know, he wants to move there. We're more interested in Andrew Robertson. This is the player that we're going to get. You can have your Benjamin Mendy if you want, because basically the premise that Liverpool go by is that it's not about making your rivals weaker. It's about making yourself stronger and winning the league and other trophies on your own terms. So while, you know, there's a worry that Sessegnon could go to United or Chelsea or Arsenal or Tottenham or Manchester City and become absolutely brilliant, if he's not right for Liverpool in this moment, then we should absolutely not be thinking about signing him. And also, I can't actually see him moving away from Fulham this summer. It kind of hinges on whether or not they get promoted to the Premier League. Obviously, they've got that playoff final coming up against Aston Villa at Wembley. But I think if they do get promoted, then he has that opportunity to gain Premier League experience and to boost his profile even further without the pressure of playing for a Big Six club. So I can't see us signing Ryan Sessegnon. I can't actually see us signing any left backs. I think really, with the news that we are potentially offering a new deal for Alberto Moreno as well, I think he's absolutely fine as our backup, and then Andrew Robertson can stay as our main left back. Right back as well, Trent Alexander-Arnold got that absolutely boxed off. Nathaniel Klein is a decent backup for now at least. And then the centre back is the one position where obviously there is always going to be talk, because it is the perennial problem for Liverpool that always gets mentioned in the summer transfer window. And it's a very, very interesting one for me, because the thing is, Van Dijk and Lovren have been a very, very good partnership since Virgil van Dijk came in. Dejan Lovren is finally looking like the kind of player that Liverpool thought they'd actually bought from Southampton for all that money all those years ago. It feels like Van Dijk brings the best out of him. He seems to complement Van Dijk very, very well in terms of their playing styles as well. However, there are two big issues with Dejan Lovren for me, which make me worry over whether or not he should be Liverpool's first choice centre-back going into next season. And the first one is, of course, the errors. Now, as good as Dejan Lovren has ever been for Liverpool, the errors never seem to have quite gone away. And I think the ultimate example of this is Old Trafford earlier on in this season in March, where Dejan Lovren was in probably the form of his Liverpool career with Virgil van Dijk coming in. Like I said, we had all those brilliant signs about them as a partnership. They looked very good. Before that game, I said that I wanted Dejan Lovren over Joel Matip. I thought he suited that game better. First 10 or 12 minutes, he was absolutely excellent. He was winning tackles. He was boxing off the spaces. He was giving Man United players no sniff of attacking potential. And then after that first 10 to 12 minutes, the thing happens. He makes that error, and then 10 minutes after that, he makes a very similar error again. And it just feels like no matter how good Dejan Lovren gets, no matter how close he gets to his absolute ceiling of top performances, the errors are always there. And look, it's possible that next season, because having had a pre-season with Van Dijk and a whole season partnered with him, he could become so good that those errors reduce themselves to maybe 1 or 2 per season, which is passable. I think you can get over the fact that your centre-back makes a couple of errors over the course of a 38-game season and all the trophies that we'll be competing for as well. However, the one other thing that worries me with Dejan Lovren is his injury record. Now, if you could guarantee that he will play all 38 Premier League games next season, absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. I'm fine with Lovren and Van Dijk being the first choice Premier League partnership. But I just don't think that's a possible thought. I think that it's highly possible that at some point over the season, Dejan Lovren will pick up some sort of knock. Joel Matip has a similar problem in terms of his injury record for Liverpool. So there's the question there of who Liverpool should be bringing in over summer. And now, obviously, the big glamour signing that a lot of people are talking about is Toby Alderweireld. He's in a very weird situation at Spurs at the moment where it's looking highly likely that he's going to leave. There is some sort of dispute going on there. However, I think there are a lot of reasons why Liverpool wouldn't go for him. And obviously, a Van Dijk-Alderweireld partnership would be brilliant. It's a potential Premier League title-winning defence right there if they're your centre-back partnership with Karius behind them and then Robertson and Alexander-Arnold either side of them. But I can't see it happening for Liverpool because I think for starters, he's 29 years old. There isn't much potential to improve there. He's already effectively an established star. He's probably going to cost a reasonable amount, even though there is this contract dispute as well. And also the wages are the big problem for me because Liverpool are not the only club that would be sniffing around Toby Alderweireld. I mean, there's been talk of Man United being interested. There's been talk of PSG being interested as well. I'm sure there are plenty of other super clubs around Europe that are sniffing around Toby Alderweireld and thinking about bringing him in this summer. And I mean, one of the main reasons that he apparently wants to leave Spurs is the contract, is the wages, is the fact that Spurs have this very odd rule about capping the amount that they pay players, and it is causing them problems. And I think if he does want more wages, if he does want to be paid premium packages in his salary, I'm not sure Liverpool can offer that. I mean, we can offer him more than he's got at Spurs, but if he's looking over his shoulder at what PSG are offering, at what Man United are offering him, I don't think Liverpool can really compete at that. And I don't think they're really in a position where they want to compete with that. You know, if we're happy with Van Dijk and Lovren, if we're not looking at signing a big name centre-back, and the lack of any centre-back being linked at Liverpool over the last few months suggests that is the state of the club at the moment, then I can't see us bringing in Toby Alderweireld. I think if you're looking at centre-back targets that Liverpool could bring in this summer, I think you're actually looking more at a player like Ranier Klavan, you know, someone who's going to come in, not necessarily as a stopgap, but simply as an extra body. Because like I said, we can't really trust Lovren to be fit all the way through the season, so we want players coming in who are able to step in when Dejan Lovren isn't fit to just cover. So I think maybe experienced centre-backs like Toby Alderweireld, but not quite of that level of talent, and also not quite at that level of wages demanded. And you've also got to take into account that Joe Gomez is in the reckoning as well. You know, the fact that Trent Alexander-Arnold has completely boxed off that right back position now suggests to me that Joe Gomez, if he wants to be in that Liverpool side next season, is going to have to finally make that move to the centre-back role that I think Liverpool had envisaged for him ever since he signed for the club. So that's certainly one to look out for, but I don't think we are going to be signing any huge players at centre-back. I think if we do, it'll be names like Ranier Klavan for around 5 to 10 million quid, and it will really be the current players that Liverpool have got available that we will be looking at to marshal our defence next season. And finally, another rumour that has popped up today. Apparently, Steven Gerrard is interested in bringing in Dominic Solanki to Rangers, and I think the slightly weird thing about this one is the fact that it isn't necessarily mentioned whether this would be a permanent move or a loan move. I don't really want him going on a permanent move because I think it almost feels like we've wasted our whole season trying to nurture Solanki, and while he hasn't been amazing, the potential is obviously there. There is a reason Liverpool signed him. He's done some decent things over the course of the season, and given a little bit more time at the club, everything could come to fruition and he could become the striker and the target man that Liverpool need from him. So a loan move I think would be good in that sense. I think if he goes away and gets more experience, gets more goals on his tally as well, and plays for a good manager like Steven Gerrard, I think Jurgen Klopp would certainly trust loaning out his players to a manager like Steven Gerrard, who he knows well, who has been brought up around the coaching ethos at the club as well. I can see that happening. The permanent move I think would annoy me a little bit, but it's certainly an interesting one because it does feel like there is going to be an overhaul of the forward lines at Liverpool this summer. Like I mentioned, there's talk of Dembele, talk of Fekir, talk of Asensio, talk of Lanzini as well. A lot of talk of players who would play some sort of role in either a front three or a front four, but there hasn't been much yet about strikers. And I think if Dom Solanki does go, it's highly likely that Sturridge is going to go as well. There's a lot of talk about whether or not Ings will be happy staying at the club and whether or not he'll actually have that much to contribute for the club. And there's also talk about Firmino needing some sort of cover to avoid him burning out at this end of the season, like he kind of has done this season. He's looked a little bit leggy over the last few games, especially when the fixture list became incredibly congested with those Champions League matches. So yeah, potential move away for Solanki, and I think if he does, then it's certainly one to watch this space in terms of the forwards that Liverpool are looking to bring in. Again, just nothing's happened yet, but there are plenty of rumours going on with regards to the transfer window, and Liverpool are absolutely at the centre of this. And I think what's heartening to take away is the fact that even though maybe none of these rumours are concrete, it's possible that none of these moves could come about. It's possible that loads of them could as well. A lot of these rumours are now coming from the continent. It's not just the English press linking Liverpool with these teams. It's journalists from abroad saying, well, you know, what big clubs could potentially be in for this player? And Liverpool are being consistently mentioned because with their performances on the Champions League this stage this season, with their cementing their status as a top 4 club in England, we are now being considered for the biggest moves on the continent, and that can only be a good thing, and it suggests that we are in for potentially a blockbuster summer transfer window at the club. So that is all for today's video. Like I said, there have been plenty of transfer rumours to go through already. The window's only been open for a couple of hours, and it already feels like Liverpool have got their fingers in as many pies as they possibly can. Here's hoping that a lot of those moves come to fruition. Here's hoping for a lot more transfer rumours and silliness between now and the end of the window, and I will be with you every step of the way with the transfer news shows. If you have enjoyed this video, do give it a like. If you're new around here, hit that subscribe button there. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to like LFC, follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll see you in a bit for either Real Madrid pre-match content or more transfer news as well, should Liverpool start making even more moves in the market. Until then, bye for now.